their work, because if it's registered as a work which is attached to them, if that is unsold, even if it is a forgery, that money still has to be redirected legally back to them, right? They have incentive not to investigate forgery. And also, art dealers have relatively less incentive to police forgeries under our model, under their model, than under our model, because they get 10% less of the value from the resale of that forgery. That's why the forgery point didn't fly in this debate. At the end of this debate, we've shown you why there's no principal distinction, and we've shown you why there are two separable commercial transactions which they haven't understood, and that's why I run this debate.
Thank you. We now move on to the reply speeches, beginning with the negative.
It's absolutely fine for me to put out into the public domain a piece of music for which I get no profit. And as a result of that, I generate a buzz about me as an artist. People like that music, they got it for free, that's more accessible to them, and in the future they're more likely to pay my future songs, pay to listen to those songs. Now, I didn't profit from that original piece of music, and I probably deserve some profit. It was just as good as all of the other songs. That side of the house has never been able to understand that you do not need to profit individually for every single piece of art and what it's worth. You profit from your career, which is an artistic career of prestige, and that's why previous works worth less still get paid out and later works worth more. The 3 points in this debate are the 3 points that we brought to you. Is there a point of sale imbalance? What do we think about commercial and artistic parity? And finally, how do we best get more production of art, which both sides agreed was a good thing, although they didn't like the sketches that they promoted, that we promote on our side. So, no point of sale imbalance, and there are 3 points to talk about here. The first one was capital. Capital is the big reason that they thought there was a point of sale imbalance, and we gave a pretty simplistic but very, very strong response, is that one artist, many dealers means, yes, more capital for artists, more capital with dealers, but also more monopoly reads for artists, which means that they can hold that over people. And if one person comes and say, I'll only pay you $10, the artist can happily say, no, all of my art is really, really good, and it will be worth more money for you in the future. I'll go to another one and get more money, that's fine. But secondly, the response that they gave us to this was, the art dealers will just create another Picasso. Two responses to that. That's never been the assumption that we've held this debate on. We all agree that artists are actually genuinely famous for their own reasons. But secondly, if that were the case that they could just create another Picasso, that buys into all of my original analysis about how art dealers actually add value as well, if that were to be accepted, but we do not accept that. Second point about point of sale imbalance is about value prediction. And the app could never ever understand this. Because when I sell my first painting, it isn't worth very much at the point of sale, but when I sell later paintings, they are worth more due to that original sale, a sale which I incentivise by selling it cheaply in the first place, and art dealers incentivise by getting them out there to be listened to. That's why I get prestige from the later paintings, and it doesn't matter if they don't get paid for the original ones. The prestige from the later ones pays off the work that I did in the fore, just like the way that people make something and sell it later on. There's a benefit there. Third point there is to talk about dealers making a gamble, and this is where Chris said that the price of art almost always goes up, which is in direct contradiction to their point, that art dealers buy a whole sway of art and that only a few of those actually give any fruition to them. And that's the point, is they do buy a whole sway of art, not all art goes up, and art dealers do make a trade-off and a gamble when they make that prediction. Okay, talking about commercial and artistic parity, and the Ferrari example has been the one that's characterised this, which is good. Sounds like said opposition are winning, given that our examples are still in the fore. Chris's analysis went like this. You can reproduce Ferraris or iPods. 3 points of response to that. Yes, and the fact that you reproduce them is again an original point of sale because your new reproduced iPods are being sold for the first time, but you don't get the rights to the iPods already sold before they were cool that are now worth more money and now cooler for people to wear around town. You don't get any benefit of that, you get the benefit of the resale, absolutely. That's the second response. They cannot simply conflate original sale and resale. And the third response is, guess what? Artists, just like Ferrari, can also reproduce because they can create new goods like all of the sketches that Gemma said artists produced at the end of their careers. They benefit from that. So just like the Ferrari family, they can continue to produce. Finally then about production of art. And again, we come back to value prediction here. If art dealers aren't able to predict and have to mitigate the risks even more seriously, then they're not going to address more pushing-edge art, they're not going to allow that art to be out in the public domain, they're going to be more secure, more conservative with art that they know will be worth money in the future, because there's a bigger trade-off for them to make. They have to predict even more precisely how valuable that art will be on their side of the house. And secondly, in response to forgery. Their forgery point never made sense, and Richard illustrated this, and Chris never came back to it. If an artist has 4 versions of an artwork that they profit 10% of, they get 40% of the benefits that they previously would have got 10% of. There's no incentive for an artist to call out forgery. Let's look at it with this example. Wayne Rooney was bought for 1 season at a low price because he wasn't very talented then. The next season, he could be picked up by any team for a much higher price. Manchester United probably wouldn't have hired him in the 4 because they would have had to pay the high price originally and they don't want to make that trade-off. But he got hired, right? He got hired for a low price. He's worth a lot in the future. That's the benefit of his prestige. We stand in opposition.
Thank you. We now welcome the last speaker of the debate.
Well, in true Victoria style, the negative team in this debate acted as though we were entirely overhauling the system, and that wasn't an accurate representation of this debate. We agreed that art collectors should indeed get a reward for the risks they take and the unique work they do. We said that reward wasn't equivalent to 100% because artists also did some of that work and they should be represented. So 2 questions. First, is the negotiation fair and balanced? Second, are there benefits to art? So first, let's talk about what the decision actually looks like if you're an artist at the beginning of your career. The first thing that both teams acknowledged was that you need to sell your art to create the reputation that you're going to be reliant upon in the future. That acknowledged that even if you could predict the value of your art in the future, you didn't have power to stop and refuse that sale at that time because you had to get your art out into the public sphere. But second, what we told you was that you often require the actual income from that art to continue your career as an artist. So insofar as you can produce works in the future, you need money in the short term to be able to continue operating as an artist, which meant all of their analysis about producing them in the future didn't actually target the fact that these people needed this money right now and therefore were forced into the position of having to sell that art no matter what the value was. But then they told us, no. The value will be accurate because there are plenty of sellers and they all want your art and you're the only person who can produce your art. Couple of responses that we gave you. First of all, that was reliant upon there not also being a huge pool of talent, which both teams acknowledged there was, which meant that in fact art dealers weren't looking for your art specifically, they were looking for underpriced, talented art which they could find in a number of places. That meant that in fact they weren't looking for your art specifically because you didn't already have a reputation. They were looking for cheap art which could eventually benefit them and eventually profit. So that analysis fell. But then they just said, it doesn't matter because you can make back the money later. You can continue to produce artwork in the future and that's how you'll profit. We told you that that presumed you had the ideas and the capacity to continue producing that art, which they never responded to. All they continued to analogize it was to iPods. We told you that you had one machine to produce iPods and that wasn't reliant upon you coming up with a new idea and a new concept every time. So in fact you had a limited capacity to continue producing these into the future. But then what we told you is even if none of that stuff were true, these individuals weren't able to accurately predict their value as that team suggested they were. But what's fair for the art collector? They told us they take on all the risk, so they should get the profit. We told you that they likely will get the profit. They get, in fact, most of the profit, and artists also take on a large risk by opting in to that particular choice of income. We think they should get rewarded for that. But they told us they do the promotion, they do the work. We told you to the extent that's true, they get the profit. But artists also do some of the work and artists also do some of the promotion. This was all of our material about how artists also contribute to their reputation in the future, which directly benefits those art collectors. They didn't give us a response to that. We proved to you that artists had an even bigger incentive under our model to do that. So let's talk about art. First of all, they mischaracterised us as suggesting that we wanted just more art. Let's look at what would happen if we wanted just more art. They said art dealers wouldn't take the risk We said they certainly would, when 95% of that profit would still go to them. But then they told us these artists would just sit back and rest on their laurels, which didn't engage with all of the analysis we provided you about how artists want to produce work. They just might not have the capacity to produce 100 paintings into the future. So what did we want? We wanted good quality art. And in order to get that, and this was my material that was never engaged with, we required people to have enough money that they didn't have to seek out profit over the types of edgy and risky art that Richard wanted to talk about in his second speaker's speech. We got the same quantity of art, or maybe slightly less, but we got a substantially better quality of art under our side, which both teams acknowledged was good. The reality is that art collectors had huge incentives to continue paying for work and promoting it and making profit. We just redirected a small percentage of that to people who deserved it. We were happy to propose.
Alright, thank you very, very much, guys. Everyone should proceed to lunch now. We are announcing the results before the draw for the ESL final at 1 later. Here.